Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to 1031 Exchanges in booming Rochester. The future's so bright in Rochester, I thought I better wear shades today. So my name is Tom Rishav, and I'm the moderator of the event today, sponsored by Jeff Peterson with CPEC1031. Alec Hamer, who's behind the scenes, thank you for all your help on this and keeping things rolling. We have three wonderful panelists today, all subject matter experts in their area. The first one I want to talk about is Jeff Peterson, the one and the only 1031 expert. Jack Mulcahey, president and owner of Capstone Commercial Financial. And he is a Rochester native, by the way, Male high school grad. And then Dusty Kanz from Remax Results, the Kanz Team, also Rochester native. This is a free-flowing open event, so please feel free to submit questions through the chat button at any time. We want to keep it open and just go back and forth. So without further ado, let's get started with Jeff. Will you please give us a background on how 1031s are going and how hot they really are right now?
Sure thing. And Tom, we shouldn't forget to mention that you are also a Rochester native and a graduate of John Marshall High School. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So we've got the Rochester guys on the panel here. Here's what I'll say. We have never seen a run like we saw in the last quarter of 2020 for 1031 exchange activity. It is vibrant. There is great velocity in the 1031 market, and it is a hot seller's market. So people can take their gains and cash out at the top of the market, and they'd like to do it without having to recognize the taxes. So we are really seeing a lot of velocity in our business. And we are seeing a lot of very sophisticated exchanges being done, build to suit exchanges, reverse construction exchanges, because the market is tight and it's hard to find replacement inventory. So that can be the challenge, is to tee up the replacement property. So extremely good time to be doing a 1031. It's not a good time, though, to call us up at the last second and say, I've decided to do an exchange. Can we set it up for tomorrow? Because the bandwidth isn't there. You need to plan ahead and get your exchange set up and be proactive about that, because the last minute, let's throw this together type of thing, it's really hard for us to do that because there's so much velocity in the marketplace.
Terrific advice. All right, well, let's go to Jack here. Jack, why don't you give us some background on what you're seeing in the marketplace, with financing, with deal flow, and things of in your expertise?
Sure, I do a lot of non-recourse financing. So CMBS, commercial mortgage-backed security financing. I do a lot of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD. That doesn't mean that's exclusive. I also do, normal conventional commercial financing. Right now, with the interest rates being low, that is also extremely hot. Interest rates range anywhere from 3 to 4.5%, depending upon the deal. I'm doing a swap rate on an office or a warehouse in Hastings, and also same client, a veterinary clinic in Arizona. And they're doing a swap loan where they're getting cash out at 3%. Fixed for 2 years with 25-year AM. And that's just incredibly low rates. The problem is that the low interest rates mixed with compressed cap rates are driving up prices. And my biggest issue is making sure that properties have the appropriate debt service coverage ratio. So the property still needs to debt service, but as the prices go up, you've got a lot of sellers that are selling based off pro forma and not current numbers. It makes it a little bit challenging, and you need somebody that knows how to massage the loan into the appropriate market and appropriate loan program. So that's kind of in a nutshell, I should say.
What kind of leverage ratios are you seeing today, Jack, or are you able to get approved?
Right now, I can do up to 80% on multifamily. I can do up to 80% on other property types, depending upon the strength of the borrower. Terms are anywhere from 5, 10, 12 years, 15 years. I'm doing a Fannie Mae apartment refinance right now. It's 12 years fixed, cash out, 75% on the cash out. So it's not taxed, and the interest rate's around 3.26. So it's pretty low, with that structure. So 80%, it's a standard. 75 on other commercial properties. CMBS on larger commercial buildings will go 80% sometimes, depending upon the borrower. It's kind of an open field. It really depends upon the building, the location. Rochester is a bit unique with the multifamily. If you're going to do an agency loan, Rochester certainly qualifies as a geographical location. The problem is that it has a concentrated employer base. So the Mayo Clinic being the main employer for the county or the city can cause some issues if you don't address them right from the start.
Interesting. So up to 80% leverage, and some of these rates are sub 3 in certain terms, right?
Some are sub 3, depending upon the loan to value. Most of them, right now in the Rochester market with multifamily, you'd probably be looking at that 3.5 range, 3.4 to 3.6, fixed for 10 years, 80% leverage. Still incredibly inexpensive money. It's incredible.
Wow. All right. Thank you for that info, Jack. So Dusty, what are you seeing right now in the market from your side, as far as statistics go, things that are happening in Rochester? And the big question is really, why Rochester? Why is Rochester unique, and why is it booming like it is?
Yeah, Rochester, the big boom, of course, is Mother Mayo. We've had this DMC initiative that kicked off about 4 years or so ago, which is, if you're not familiar, which is kind of a private and a state and a federal grant money to really boost the Rochester area for not only Mayo Clinic but other private business and housing, entertainment, all sorts of activities going down here. We're projected to see about 150,000 influx of people over the next 20 to 30 years in the Rochester area, which is really pushing housing, commercial, everything in the area right now. The last 3-4 years, we've seen about a 10 to 12% average appreciation increase in housing alone, which is appreciation rates which are pretty high compared to the national average. I think it's just a great place to be and a great time. The only thing we're running into is low inventories and a lot of buyers. So sellers are in a great position right now if you're selling, prices are good. Buying's the hard part, to find the right property and make it all work.
Are you seeing a lot of 1031 exchanges in the Rochester area right now, Dusty? And if you are, what are they in? Are they typically multifamily, industrial warehouse, office, retail? What are you seeing down there?
We're seeing a lot of cash come in from all over, not only the country, but all over the world because of the Mayo Clinic. But we are seeing a lot of 1031s. I think a lot of them are in multifamily, some larger complexes that have been built and sold in the last 3-4 years. Some of these I-REITs are, coming in and then have sold some to some other REITs across the country. So we're seeing some more and more 1031 action down here. I think people have noticed across the country and across the world what's happening in the Rochester with the Mayo Clinic, and they're trying to get in and get a part of the action.
Good, interesting stuff. So Jack, can you talk a little bit about how you use the non-recourse loans and why people would like those or not like those, other than competitive with the recourse loans and things like that?
Well, the first thing is that non-recourse loans start with a 30-year amortization. most depository lenders are going to be 20 or 25. So if you call up your local bank or credit union or whatever, they're going to be a 25-year AM, 75% loan to value, somewhere around 4%. And everything still has to debt service to a certain ratio. So you have to divide the NOI by the mortgage payment and hit generally a 1.2, 1.25 to 1 ratio. People, hopefully understand that. So as the loan shortens an AM and the rate goes up, the mortgage payments increase and the debt coverage ratio it's harder to hit. So with the longer amortization and the lower rates, it's easier to hit a debt coverage ratio. Now, on another note, which is important to a lot of people, is that a non-recourse loan, you do not personally guarantee. So if I do a Fannie Mae or a Freddie Mac loan or a CMBS loan, I do not want a person's tax return because they're not personally guaranteeing the loan. The property itself acts as the collateral. The borrower is actually considered a sponsor. And by being a sponsor, they're sponsoring the LLC or the entity that owns the property that is actually what's guaranteeing it. I don't know if anybody can still hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Everything's
Okay,
good.
well, my computer went weird. As long as you can hear me, that's fine. So with non-recourse, because you're not guaranteeing it, the loan does not come due if something happens to you. And the example would be, I did a loan for a woman. She was elderly. She had 2 sons. She did a non-recourse loan. She passed away. The lender called up her sons and said, "Your loan is due." And they said, "Well, what do you mean? Mom was, Mom guaranteed it." And they said, "Exactly, but your mom passed away. Your loan is due because it's a recourse loan. We need to see your tax returns. We need you to personally qualify for the loan." On a non-recourse loan, and I just actually really had this happen, guy closed a loan, or the sponsor closed the loan on a Monday. On a Tuesday or Wednesday night, he died. I did a couple of non-recourse apartment loans for him, and I called him, and his son-in-law called me back and said, "Jim died last night." After saying sorry and talking about what a great guy Jim was, he asked me, what do we do with the loan? And my response is, keep making payments. So that's it, just keep making payments. Because the loan was not personally guaranteed by Jim, it was guaranteed by the LLC. And he did have a wife and a provision that everything transferred to her upon his death. So the loan just keeps going forward.
Interesting. I mean, that can make a big difference.
Sure, it's huge. I mean, so it's a good estate planning tool, primarily, and plus, it doesn't come off as a personal debt to you. So if you're going to go buy a house or a car, it's a non-contingent liability. It's not something that would show up on your credit report, and it's not something you would need to list on your personal financial statement as an actual personal guarantee liability. So that's also the difference. Again, it's the collateral secures the asset, not the sponsor or not the borrower.
It would seem that the longer amortization period would be really attractive as well, to be able to go 30 years.
Well, the 30-year AM, it's going to decrease your payments, so it's going to increase your cash flow dramatically. And then most depository lenders, when they offer a 10-year loan, what it really is a 5-year loan with a 5-year reset. It's locked for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, they reset the interest rate based upon a predetermined index with a built-in spread. and your loan rate is probably never going to go down. They'll use that as a floor. But if interest rates are higher 5 years from now, they will actually apply a higher interest rate and re-underwrite the loan to make sure that it's debt service. So it's a really unique thing on an agency loan like the one I'm doing now. That's a 12-year loan. So it goes for 12 years. I've got other agency loans on apartment buildings that'll go for 10 years, and then it'll be an ARM with a 6-month adjuster for the remaining, for another remaining 10 years, and balloon at year 20. So it's just a safer, more of a long-term strategy, I guess, the main thing.
That's great advice, especially the estate planning part. That was interesting. Dusty, I was going to ask, when we had talked earlier, you had some stats regarding Rochester.
Yep.
Do you have things that might show what the growth rate in Rochester is relative to the rest of Minnesota or possibly the United States or other areas, possibly income, median price increases, whatever it might be that you wanted to show or could show?
Sure, yep. I'll just share my screen here quick and give you some stats here and what's happening in Rochester and kind of where we're at here from the last 2 years.
And while you're doing that, I just want to remind everybody in attendance that please feel free to chat, hit the chat box down at the bottom, ask a question. Any question is fine, and we'll make sure we ask it right away.
You just need Alec to hit share screen if you can. Maybe that won't come up. I can kind of go over here just to give you an idea. Our growth rate right for last year. Okay, here we go. We're about 10.88% for growth rate last year in Rochester. For the our long-term average is about 3.58%. If I go into housing stats, we're up about appreciation 9-10% for the year over 2019 to 2020. Our numbers are about the same as our median price has gone up too. So we're seeing a positive growth down here all over, across the board, no matter location or whatnot in Rochester.
So the growth rate is nearly triple what you're
nearly
saying,
tripled,
right?
yeah.
Wow.
And we're seeing, with the DMC initiative, if they're projecting 150,000 or so people the next 20, 30 years, we're just running into the problem of not enough inventory, whether it's housing, commercial. They're building a lot of buildings down here. We've got some more restaurants as things coming in, even through the COVID crisis. It's kind of amazing. Last year in Rochester, with the COVID crisis, I think was probably the biggest year Rochester has ever seen as far as sales, price increase, median price increase, and the overall, I think, commercial. We've had some commercial projects going on for sale. You expect, you put them on at a little bit higher price, and all of a sudden you're getting 5, 6, 7, 8 offers on them, and they're pushing the prices up even higher. And, due to a lot of money, I think, across the country, and people recognizing Rochester as a hot market to be in with the growth expected over the next 20 to 30 years with Mayo Clinic and the whole DMC initiative that the state has implemented here. So I think it's a safe market that's going to be a safe market for the next foreseeable future. And there's a lot of excitement down here.
For people that don't know what DMC stands for, Dusty, could you tell us what that means?
Yep, it's the Destination Medical Center. And what it is, it's a partnership between Mayo Clinic, the state of Minnesota, and also private business and entity, where they've got $1 billion basically between, of money coming into the area for growth, not only just Mayo Clinic, but other venues as far as entertainment, housing, affordable housing, parks, recreation. We're building two schools right now, rehabbing another one here. It's going to start here this year. It's a whole thing, and what it's geared at is Mayo brings people in here as far as doctors, residents, employees, physicians, and they train them. People come here across the world to, for their treatments. but they want people to stay here. They don't want them to come, train, and then leave the area. They want people to stay here, have their expertise to stay here, and have something to do while they are staying here. Not have to go to Chicago or the cities or someplace for entertainment, for activities and whatnot.
Can you think of a more pandemic resistant economy than Rochester?
Outside of some other, you get in Orlando and Austin, Texas, people flocking there from other parts of the country, New York and California. We haven't seen, we thought, and when we hit March of last year, June last year, we thought we'd be dead in the water with being a lockdown. And all of a sudden the market just took off crazy. And then, like I say, Rochester's had the biggest year it's seen in sales. And, I've been doing this 20 some years. My dad's been doing it since the 70s, and we've never seen anything like it. And even now, in the last week, we've had some properties come on the market. We've seen 5 offers on some, we've seen 4 offers on some, and they're bidding them over the list price. So it's continuing. It's not slowing down that we foresee anytime soon. And the lack of inventory is a big push on that as well. Our inventory, our numbers are relatively flat in inventory, from year to year, because we don't have the big building coming in as far as housing. We're starting to see some national guys come back in, but it's the prices that are going up because of that. Same way with commercial as well. There's some stuff being built. It's just not. There's a lot more buyers out there than there is sellers right now. Our property available.
That's incredible.
It is.
So Dusty, what do you see relative to 1031s, when somebody, let's just take a local investor in Rochester, and when they sell, are they going into something bigger within the area? Are they going out of the city? Are they building from ground up? What are they doing with those 1031 proceeds?
Right now, for example, I've got a client that had bought a lot of single family homes the last 20 years. He's in the process right now of selling off half his portfolio and going into some larger multi-family units. It's been hot, with the housing inventory so low. There's a hot market for rentals right now, especially with the young generation as well, it seems like. But high rises, apartments, and we've seen now a lot with these. We'll wait to see what happens with the office here when we come out of this COVID restrictions. Are people going to go back to the office buildings and start filling them up again? Is there going to be a high demand or not? We'll have to wait and kind of see. We think there's going to be a large demand again for the people to come back to the office buildings. But we're seeing with, like I say, with the DMC, whole initiative is to have something to do here with activities. There's been, parks and rec and some other venues, restaurants, bars, to get people to get out in the community and have something to do when they're off work. There's some, push for that, a big push for that.
So
Dusty, in Minneapolis, as well as large urban areas like San Francisco, Manhattan, we've seen, increases in carjackings, burglaries, theft, general, decline in civility. What's the tenor in Rochester as far as social unrest and discord, crime, and so forth?
I think Rochester, we're still a small, tight-knit community. It's kind of a big community where everybody knows kind of everybody. Our crime rates are very low. I think we had maybe a murder last year, maybe one. I don't, if that. I think people feel safe in Rochester. A big thing with our city administration and our city is they push for the, kind of a nice outdoor lifestyle with a lot of parks, a lot of trail systems. The police department here is very proactive. A lot of, we don't have, I would say bad areas or good areas. It seems like, everybody feels pretty safe no matter where you go around here. But with growth, of course, there comes some continued, growth comes from problems. But I think they have a good grasp on it, and this growth is not happening all in one shot. It's a gradual 10, 20-year process. So as we grow, their services are growing too. So I think it's a pretty safe area to be in.
Good question, Jeff. By the way, just a reminder to everyone, please feel free to hit the chat button and ask a question regarding 1031's financing, market questions for Dusty, whatever you might have. Jeff, I have a question for you. Could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing, some of the more sophisticated things that are going on in the 1031 market, like non-safe harbor and construction exchanges and things like that?
Sure. I have a client that in, just hindsight really hit it out of the park. He bought a couple of industrial properties, warehouse properties in the Rochester area 20 years ago. They've been relatively management free, relatively low stress properties, but he's kind of gotten to the point where he's taken a lot of depreciation, the values are high, and he is going to sell those at the top of the market. He's not going to stay in Rochester with his money. He's going elsewhere with his funds. The reason is he can't find more properties in Rochester. So he is looking at other areas like Jacksonville, parts of Texas in particular, Austin, areas where he sees that new housing and new households are being created. But he wants to exchange into the more sunny, warm, and to maybe tax-friendly climates. Florida and Texas are in particular hot on his list. So I think we're going to see a trend where people are going to take their profits tax deferred and roll them into other projects. Now, the problem is, I don't think people want to overpay for 1960s built real estate when they can do a build to suit exchange and construct a new property with 2021 brand new fixtures, brand new improvements. And the costs, even with lumber costs and labor costs being kind of high right now, the cost of new construction is roughly comparable to what you'd pay for old tired inventory that you'd have to compete with other buyers for. So we are seeing a lot of people designing a build to suit exchange where they're buying the land and constructing improvements on the land through their intermediary so that they're getting the property that they want built to their specifications. And in particular, we're seeing this with small business owners that are doing owner-occupied properties. You may have somebody that's inside of the city limits that's subject to more regulatory hassles and high taxes, and they want to move their business location further outside of the higher tax zone and outside of the higher regulatory area. And they want to build a new facility that really meets their needs. And fortunately, banks are ready to do loans on owner-occupied deals. And there's a lot more opportunity to buy raw land and construct on it than there is to buy existing structures because the market is just really tight. We do see fragility in certain areas, entertainment venues, restaurants, areas that are adversely affected by the pandemic. And I think you might see downtown office space being one of those areas. Those areas are soft. And, we're going to have to see what happens with the rollout of the vaccines and how quickly people sort of resume their normal lifestyles. But we might still see softening in those areas, those fragile areas, maybe through the end of this year, or at least the first 3 quarters of this year. Now, on the 1031 front, we see a lot of people doing what Dusty is talking about, selling lots of their small little assets that they acquired probably prior to the Great Recession. They've now seen huge increases in value, strong demand for their stuff, and they want to get out of those more management intensive one-off investments and try to consolidate into bigger, better properties, maybe better locations, maybe different sort of business segments. So they're getting out of the single family rentals and maybe transitioning into mini storage or something that's a little bit less management intensive than renting to residential tenants, which can be, kind of a headache, particularly when you've got a restriction on evictions and, some extra bureaucratic things to deal with right now.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So Jeff, let me ask you a question. You mentioned reverse construction exchanges with the intermediary, I was always of the understanding that you could not use your 1031 proceeds to buy raw land and then do the construction loan. What was I mistaken in that?
Yeah, there's the general rule is that you can't exchange into that which you already own because it wouldn't be an exchange. So what you do is you have the qualified intermediary, that would be commercial partners exchange or CPEC1031, buy the new land. Let's say that we're going to buy a flat vacant lot in a downtown area, and having the intermediary buy the land and hold title to it while the improvements are constructed allows you to exchange into not only the raw land, but also the improvements that are constructed thereon. Now, the question is, do you want to do this as a safe harbor exchange under the RevProc 2037? An intermediary can only hold that property for 180 days. And you can only get so much construction value created in 180 days. Or do you want to be really sophisticated and do what's called the non-safe harbor reverse exchange that is valid, but more sophisticated and doesn't have the certainty of the IRS's safe harbor? RevProc 2037 says that they don't make any inference as to the legitimacy of non-safe harbor exchanges done outside of RevProc 2037. And there's a huge body of case law that says you can do reverse exchanges. So the other way to do it, if we're doing a $40 million construction project, probably not going to get enough of that constructed within 180 days to do it in the safe harbor. And we see a lot of money from Chicago, from LA, from the East Coast, coming into the Twin Cities and Rochester areas. And we want to be able to give them replacement property of equivalent or greater value and equivalent or greater equity. And sometimes the only way to do that is to do it as a non-safe harbor construction exchange and get the intermediary in early and holding title while those improvements are constructed up to the requisite value. If you sell a property in Chicago for $40 million, you need to come to the Twin Cities and buy a replacement property of equal or greater value. And it has to exist as real estate in order for it to be a like-kind exchange. And so in those contexts, we're getting involved in doing things really early to get a jump start on the construction and get the improvements in existence even well before they've listed their relinquished property for sale.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say 180 days is not a lot of time to, build a 120 unit apartment building.
Right. You might be able to build a 12 unit apartment, but you're not going to be able to build enough to get up in those really high numbers.
Right.
Particularly with weather. Cold weather can slow construction and increase costs. So another thing that people are doing is they're timing their developments to start in the spring and try to get all of that productive time between spring, summer, and fall to get as much of the shell and the sort of skeleton of the project up before cold weather hits.
Very interesting, powerful strategies that can be used for a lot of that. We have a couple of questions coming in. First one here is for Dusty. It's from Andy. So Dusty, I was looking at a couple of multifamily in Rochester that have been on the market for quite a long time. Is this because it is out of the Rochester hub? I'm not exactly sure about that.
If it's in Rochester, one thing we're seeing with these multifamily, let's say duplexes, fourplexes, is the prices. Let's say a duplex now. Most of these duplexes are coming on over at $200,000. Well, it's hard to cash flow on an older duplex when the rents are relatively, the $800 to $900, range. These new high rises, they're nice. Everybody wants this nice new, no issues, all the amenities you want, at $1,100 on up price point. Well, these multi-levels, duplexes, fourplexes, from $200,000 to $350,000, they're not cash flowing. So what we're seeing is the prices have gone up, and either a first time or a starter out investor can't make those work. a person coming in with 1031 money or a lot of cash down, they're working because they're putting the money down and they need a place to park their money for now. So they're cash flowing a little bit, they're breaking even, but they got their money parked into an investment that's, pretty solid. Going back to what Jeff was saying about, we're seeing a lot of buildings, these older buildings competing with, you say new builds. We're seeing a lot of these older buildings being torn down here in Rochester, which we've never seen in this city. You're probably familiar with the old Seneca plant, just got tore down this week. The old Post Building building downtown got tore down this winter.
Wow.
Some property on the north side by Walmart North got tore down, all to make way for new commercial development. So, like Jeff was saying,
Did they tear down the corn cob?
They left the corn cob. They're gonna landmark that as a historical fact, and the corn cob is staying. So they fought for that, but everything else is gone. And actually, it's this week they started that project. So we are seeing a lot of this kind of regeneration or rehabbing these land, especially close to downtown, tearing down these buildings, and they're going to be building all new just because of the fact that new is obviously better than a 100-year-old building in downtown Rochester. And money is not a factor. It doesn't seem like some of this has got some, city money or state money, especially with this DMC initiative. They're getting some incentives there to do that. And there's also a time limit on some of these. They've got to do this DMC project. It has to be done every year. They have to do a certain percentage of it. So they're taking the initiative to really make sure they meet these goals, so they don't lose out on this investment. But I go back to Andy's question. If it's a multi-level in Rochester, if it's sitting on the market, it's probably because of price and the cash flow part of it. Because we see very few of them that sit on the market. And even if we do hear about something coming on the market, there's usually a line of people there. Like right now, I've got a duplex coming on, an investor bought here last spring. He actually gonna rehab the whole property inside and out, and there's already a line of people there just because they see the work going on. They know it's a duplex. There's already people calling saying, "Hey, what's the price of this going to be? When can we get in here and buy it?" And it's not going to be ready for probably another 3 months. And the price will be above and beyond probably what cash flow is, but there's people with money out there and they got to park it someplace, it seems like, so they're paying it.
Interesting. Andy had a follow-up to that, Dusty. It says, so in other words, these properties have been on the market for a while, he's saying. He said, is it because it's out of the Rochester hub? These were 40 units plus each and built in the 1980s. So what would be the reason for that to be on the market for a long time?
Again, probably common age, condition maybe, and price and cash flow is probably, The other thing is we're seeing is Rochester has seen a large number of high rises being built, especially in the last 5 years. We've never seen the growth of these high rises in the last 5 years. There's 3 or 4 going up right now that are, 160, 200 units. They're competing, older units are competing with these newer units, and these newer units, they're getting an incentive to come in and rent these newer units, whether it's, a month or two free, or, you get free membership to the gym, they got the pools, the gyms and everything. We're just seeing these older units are just not as popular as because of the new stuff coming in. And people are, people want to be in maybe a more secure building, a safer location maybe, or, underground parking, heated parking, or great weather in Minnesota. So there's probably coming down to price, location maybe, if they're 40 unit plus, that would be my guess there.
Okay, this probably is for you, Dusty, but anybody can answer it on the panel here. Scott has a question saying, how will the doubling of the property taxes in the last 3 years in the DMC area affect the values?
What I've seen is values keep going up. Yeah, like I say, there's a lot of money coming in from all over the country and all over the world. We just keep seeing values going up. Like I say, they've been buying the Post Bulletin, for example, right downtown there on First Street there. They bought that, tore it down. They're going to rebuild a new high rise there. There's no question about values are going up there. The taxes are going up, but there's just the demand there's so much demand there. It's not affecting these investors that we're seeing.
Is the demand going to be skewed, I guess would be a word. You get new apartment buildings, and I've seen this in Minneapolis and St. Paul, where you build new apartment buildings on the light rail, for example, and not necessarily an A-class neighborhood, but now you've got an A-class building and you have to charge A-class rent. Is there going to be a saturation point in Rochester where there's maybe too many brand new A-class apartment buildings?
I think we're starting to see that. I think, we've never had this many buildings go up, these 100, 200, 300 unit buildings go up in Rochester in, our lifetime. So the speculation is with 150,000 people coming over the next 20, 30 years, they think they're going to fill them. I know last year, I think they projected 5,500 apartment doors being built in Rochester. That's a large number for our community. We're relatively about 130,000 people right now. And, you double our population next 20, 30 years. They expect they need that amount of volume to handle it.
Wow.
It's really changing.
That is huge. I can't even believe it.
I'm just looking at a graph here on our income by population here across the nation in Rochester. We're about that 150 to 200,000 range. Let's take 60 to 200,000 range in income. We're about on average 11 to 12% higher than the national average of income standards in Rochester. So that really is a big boost for housing. People, what can they afford in rentals, housing, everything. So we've got a good base here.
We've got a question from Lance. He said, with Mail buying and owning more and more property of its own space and not paying taxes, do you anticipate this impacting property values? Right now, he said, tough to find tenants at competitive rents when the real estate tax burden is passed on to them.
Again, we're seeing values keep rising. We're seeing a lot of buyer demand here in the property tax, and the values is not scaring them away. There's still, like I say, you get a property, you get 3, 4, 5 offers on it. There's still through 3, 4 other buyers still looking for other property. I don't think with the Mayo and this whole DMC thing, the initiative on that was to try and alleviate some of this tax burden, especially in Olmsted County down here and the residents. But I think as the tenants and these high rises come in, they're trying to keep the rents competitive, and as some of these sit maybe vacant a little bit longer than they thought, the rents are going to come down probably a little bit, and they're going to find that sweet spot where, hey, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath rent is going to be $1,100 in a new high rise, and that's what they got to project off of. We're seeing some down the flats on downtown there. We're seeing rents, and you wouldn't even imagine this in Rochester in your lifetime, $3,300 on one of these luxury high rises. I mean, we're seeing,
my goodness, yeah.
It's New York rates in Rochester, which we can't even imagine here, but it's happening.
So you're saying you think that the Mayo Clinic buying more and more of its own space is a good thing possibly for property values, and property values are going to continue to move up?
Oh yeah, every time Mayo buys something, everything around it goes up. It's just a fact. One other thing here to look at, Rochester is playing in a kind of a transit hub from the old Seneca building. You're familiar where that is, southeast there, out on 2nd Street Northwest there, towards just on the west side of town. It's going to be like the cities has their light rail. This is going to be the Rochester's light rail transit hub. So these two areas are projected to have not only commercial, but living, parked and rec and everything. And they're going to have, a sort of a transition, which goes through downtown. So everybody can live, work, and play, park there, and they can get anywhere in Rochester downtown through, whether it's a rail or a trolley or whatnot. So it's really going to blow up those two areas. So everything around there, and like I say, anything Mayo buys, they buy it. Everything around it goes up.
All right, Jeff, we've got a question for you. Thanks for all that info, Dusty and Jack. With the Biden administration, what is the future of Section 1031? I know you've gotten this a million times. I'm sure it's a topic for Jack and for Dusty. But Jeff, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I am nervous. There is a tension in Washington, and I don't know what Biden is going to tackle in the first 100 days. I don't know where he's going to put his emphasis, if it's going to be on immigration, if it's going to be on the pandemic, if it's going to be on stimulus infrastructure, or if he's going to emphasize taxes. Without getting political, they have a lot on their plate. But if they tackle tax reform and want to roll back the tax incentives that occurred in 2018, they may be inclined to increase capital gains taxes to make it more equivalent to earned income. They may want to raise overall tax brackets. And they may want to eliminate things like the step up in basis. They may want to further reduce the deductibility of mortgage interest and property taxes. The emphasis may be on removing deductions and incentives that generally support and encourage people to buy and own their own real estate. That's a very great possibility. So yes, 1031 was discussed in July by the then candidate Biden as being curtailed or eliminated for folks that make more than $400,000 a year. I don't want to be political, but I would really hate to see our fragile US economy suffer because of changes in the tax code that could be made retroactive, say to the beginning of the year. Those type of changes and uncertainty about those changes could slow what we hope will be a very rapid recovery once people start getting vaccinated in great numbers. If I were in political office, I would hold off on doing anything with the tax code for a little bit. You've got a lot of other things to deal with vaccinations, pandemic, infrastructure, and other things, other challenges. I'd leave the tax code alone for a little bit, because the lower taxes, the incentives that business owners have right now really will increase property values and will encourage job growth organically. And that's, I think, what we're going to need as we come out of the backside of this terrible COVID-induced recession.
Yes, no doubt. And let's hope that that does not happen with anything to do with 1031s or major changes in the tax code.
But it could happen. 1031s could be eliminated. That's the truth.
So let's talk about that briefly. If that actually happened, let's just say that the worst case scenario happened. To all three of you, how do you perceive it would impact the state of investment property real estate?
Well, I'm a chair of a PAC for the Federation of Exchange Accommodators, and our industry is raising money through our PAC so that we can get in front of legislative people and educate them on the benefits of 1031. And we're conducting studies to show how much revenue a state may generate from increased transfer tax, deed tax, mortgage registration tax, higher property taxes because there's more velocity in the marketplace. We're trying to show the benefits of having capital move to the most advantageous real estate investments, and discuss, property owners that own real estate, they're paying taxes all along the way because they're paying their property taxes. They don't just pay taxes on the sale, they pay taxes on the carry. And why real estate maybe is a little bit different than, say, selling a share of IBM stock, where you don't really have the carrying costs. You only have the gain when you trigger that realization or sale. So real estate is kind of special in that it's kind of illiquid. It takes a long time to sell. And if we eliminate 1031, I think you're going to see a pretty big decrease in demand for real estate. There won't be those little guys trying to climb the ladder to the next level up. So if there's no one beneath you that wants to climb into your property, you're not going to have an opportunity to climb up to the next property either. And so lower property values means that you may not be able to refinance your property when it comes time to do a major capital improvement because you don't have comparable sales at any, high level. And you may not be able to keep the upkeep on your property up because you can't tap your unused equity to do the big roof repair or to replace the elevator. So we may see a general decline in the quality and quantity of our commercial real estate infrastructure. And that will hurt. That will hurt growth. That will not help with job creation, and that will not help create the infrastructure where we need it.
Great analysis. Jack, what do you think about the financing piece that Jeff said about lower values that people could get stuck with not being able to refi or do cash
I
out?
hardly agree. My concern with getting rid of 1031 exchanges is exactly as Jeff stated. I think it would just stop or curtail the trade, the trading to where it's almost non-existent. If values drop, and this is the one advantage to a longer amortization also. Remember back, buying a house with a 3-year arm. Well, it sounded great because it was incredibly cheap to get into it, but then the 3 years went by and rates were higher. So with multifamily, you could end up where you go to refinance your property again, and it doesn't debt service or it doesn't comp out because the values have decreased. And then the bank, technically, you're violating a covenant with debt service coverage ratio covenant, and they could foreclose. It's a recipe for disaster as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it truly is.
Dusty, do you want to comment on that?
I think we've all heard the rumblings of, the administration going after capital gains, even on your, your personal residence. They start going after that. There's no incentive for it really greatly reduces the incentive for home ownership, and the devaluation of home ownership will be huge across the country. They start, your home is your biggest asset typically, you start devalue, you're going after those gains. Do you sell your house? You can't even go buy, another house, a move up house anymore. In your investment, a lot of people we have that sell their initial house, buy investment property, whether it's multifamily or whatnot, and use those gains, for that reason. So they start going after capital gains tax. It's really going to crush real estate.
Great info. Well, we have the 3 players here that are needed for 1031. We have the real estate agent, Dusty, that you affect a sale. Jack affects the debt replacement. And then, of course, the most important probably in the whole situation would be the qualified intermediary, Jeff Peterson. Jeff, do you want to give the last few minutes here before we end and take final questions, exactly what a qualified intermediary is, why they're needed, and what they do?
Sure. I don't sell any real estate and I don't sell any investments. I am really just the humble administrator that facilitates the mechanics of your 1031 exchange. So when you sell your relinquished property, you need an intermediary to hold those proceeds to insulate you from receiving the cash. And then you need to identify your replacement properties within 45 days after the date of the closing. And you can identify to your qualified intermediary. We will help provide the form. We will provide reminders. We will do those things to help you be successful to identify your replacements. And then you need to close on your replacement properties within 180 days of the sale of your old property. So both the 45-day clock and the 180-day clock are running concurrently. My job is to prepare the paperwork to make sure that we're complying with the Treasury regulations on the sale of your old relinquished property, that you're identifying your replacement property, and then we're preparing the documents necessary to comply with the Treasury regs on the replacement property so that you have a fully papered and correct tax deferred exchange. We want to move all of your equity from the sale of your old relinquished property generally into other real estate that's going to be held for investment or business purposes. A lot of times I'm getting a call from somebody that wants to flip a property or wants to receive a property that's going to be used as a flip. But flips don't generally qualify because they're inventory, they're property you're holding for investment or business purposes. So we can be part of the solution of working with the accountant, working with the attorney to make the business plan such that you can move from being in a really high effective tax bracket, like a flipper is, to a very low effective tax bracket where an investor that's selling properties have been rented and held for investment purposes. And if you think about it, the incentives, the inducements really require you to go up or equal in value. You have to stay on that treadmill for debt by either offsetting your debt relief with new cash or with new debt that you're taking out on the replacement property. The inducement is to get back into the game and continue your investment into equal or greater valued property and equal or greater equity property. The stimulus effect of that on our economy is tremendous. So while this is great for general investors, mom and pop investors and other business owners, it's really good for the economy as a whole because it increases property values, increases housing stock, and moves capital to the most advantageous and needed place. When the big oil boom was going on in North Dakota, there wasn't enough infrastructure, there wasn't enough rental housing, warehouse space, restaurants, and other properties. We saw a lot of people in the Twin Cities moving their capital through 1031 exchanges up to places like Williston and Bismarck and building the infrastructure that was so needed for housing and for warehouse and industrial. That wouldn't have happened as rapidly or as organically if we didn't have the 1031 modality to move capital to where it was most advantageous and most needed. That really helped the economy up there grow faster. And that's what I want to see happen is I want to see the economy continue to grow and expand, and having high property values in the United States is a good thing for the United States. It's a good thing for all of the homeowners and people that are sort of building their equity every time that they make their mortgage payment and pay a little bit more off on their homes and seeing appreciation in their properties. I'm so happy for the nurses and medical technicians that have been able to buy single family homes in Rochester and see a 10 or 12% increase every year on the value of their biggest investment, their home. That's got to be a wonderful feeling for them to see that accumulation of wealth occurring every year, that they stay living in a wonderful town like Rochester. So we are great for the economy. 1031 is a wonderful tool for organically stimulating growth. I hope that Congress will continue to see the value of it. If you don't mind, I'll just mention that 1031 has been around in the code in some iteration now for 100 years. This is our 100th year anniversary. And so it's a wonderful provision. I think there's a reason it's been in the code for almost a century now. It's because it works. It works for investors and it works for the economy as a whole.
Great information. Well, I think we're pretty much to the end here. If there's any final questions, please get them in. Otherwise, I'd like to thank Jack and Dusty and Jeff, of course. And if you guys want to give out your contact information, that would be terrific. You can do that now if anybody wants to reach out and get advice or talk with you. If you want to go ahead and do that, you can.
Yeah, if anybody's looking for stats or information on Rochester, reach out to me, Dustin at RochesterAreaProperties.com. You can also go on the KanzTeam.com, KANZ. But we do a quarterly kind of an update on stats, what's going on in Rochester. If you shoot me an email, we'll put you on that list, just so you know what's going on in the Rochester market.
For myself, you can contact Jay Mulcahey, and that's MULCAHEY at Capstone CF, so CapstoneCharlieFrank.com. Just to mention, I do all property types. That includes credit tenant net lease, triple net lease. So if you've got assets that they don't have to be multifamily, they don't have to be office buildings, it could be virtually anything, as long as it's tied to real estate. And My license is a broker's license, so just as a heads up, I'm not licensed to finance 1 to 4 units.
So you do everything except for the 1 to 4s.
Yep, everything else I can do.
My name is Jeff Peterson. I am at 612-643-1031. I am a sounding board and resource for attorneys, accountants, investors, bankers. I like to collaborate with other professionals and be part of the team in facilitating real estate closings that involve a 1031. And I just really groove on working with people. So feel free to give me a call about your speculative deals that you're thinking about putting together. I like to be part of the team and get involved early. And if I can help you be successful, I will be happy to help as much as I can.
Jeff is known affectionately up in the Twin Cities area as Mr. 1031. If you have a question about 1031 exchanges, everybody calls Jeff. You have to. I mean, there's no one else to call. You call Jeff.
Thanks, John.
Well, that was terrific, you guys. Alec just told me that an email will be going out to everybody who attended as well, so you'll get contact information there also. With that being said, we are all finished here. Thank you very much to everyone for taking time out of your day, and thanks to all 3 of you for participating. We really appreciate it.
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Tom. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Tom.
Yep, have a good day, you guys.
Thank you.